You all set, Andrea?
I'm ready.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Board of Control meeting for August 26th, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Good morning, everyone. It is now 11:03 a.m. Calling the roll for the Monday, August 26th Board of Control meeting. We have Nan Baker, Dale Miller, Trevor Macular serving as an alternate for Dan Brady, Mike Dever, Dennis Kennedy serving as an alternate for Armin Budish,
Here.
Lenora Lockett. We have a quorum.
Okay, if everyone will take a minute to review the minutes of the Board of Control meeting of August 19th. I think those were provided to everybody in advance. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval of the minutes indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Is there any public comment today?
No public comment at this time.
We'll move on to the next item. Are there any tabled items?
No tabled items.
So we can move into the first scheduled item on the agenda.
Yes, the first item, BC 2019-628, Department of Public Works recommending awards on requisition 45480 and to enter into contracts with various providers in the total amount not to exceed $490,000 for construction material testing services for the period September 3rd, 2019 through September 2nd, 2022 for the following providers: Solar Testing Laboratories and Resources International, Inc.
Nicole English with Public Works. This is a contract that we typically hire annually. This year we've chosen to pick two consultants in order to make sure that the workload, sometimes you call on one, you need them out tomorrow and they're not available. So we're picking two that should last us for 2 years instead of just doing it annually and picking one. These contracts are used mostly for our road and bridge construction where there's requirements that you have to test concrete and the steel, and so we call an outside agency to do that. And so they have submitted, 4 people submitted on an RFQ. We selected these two as the top ranking, and they both meet the diversity goals that were set.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilman Miller.
Regarding Solar Testing Laboratories, that's an interesting name. Did they originally have a different, narrower function and then broaden their range of services?
I don't know their history, but we have used them. There's really the 4 that submitted are the 4 that we've used forever, sort of on and off. You know, we rotate a little bit. So we've used them for a long time to do these services, so I don't know what they initially started. Yeah, it is an interesting name.
Actually, Mr. Chair, we've actually been working with them for well over 20 years now, so I'm not sure what the reasoning was for selecting Solar as their name, but.
Provide the kind of services you're looking
Yes.
for? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Nicole, quick question on the consolidated agenda. It said Resources International, and all the backup it says Resource International.
It is Resource, no S at the end.
Okay. So, Andrea, if you can make sure that's reflected.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second. Mr. McAleer, all those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Next item, item BC 2019-629, Department of Public Works, submitting an amendment to a contract, subsidiary number 3, to a contract with Fabrizi Recycling, Inc. for resurfacing of Bagley Road from Olmsted Township West Corporation Line to Fitch Road in Olmsted Township for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $2,428, recommending to accept construction as complete and in accordance with plans and specifications, requesting authority for the county treasurer to release the escrow account in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, section 153.63.
Nicole English again with Public Works. So this is a final on the Bagley Road project. Subsidiary number 2 was actually a negative. We came in and the construction engineers thought they had kept enough money in the project to finish the project. There was a couple things that came up at the last minute that they needed to do, which is why this increase of this minimal amount is here. but the final cost of construction is still 3% under the original contract. So it's still negative as a whole off the original award, but this is just to finalize the contract.
Any questions? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Do I have a second? Second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved.
Moving on to item number BC 2019-630, Department of Public Works submitting an amendment to a contract with Aramark Uniform and Career Apparel Group, Inc. for employment uniform rental services for county employees in various county buildings, and is for the period June 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to December 31st, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $12,600.
Good morning, Tom Pavich, Department of Public Works. This item, we're just looking to amend our Public Works county uniform contract for additional 4 months. We have an RFP that's already closed, and we're in the process of finalizing the scoring and submitting that award to start January 1st.
Okay, any questions on this item? None, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved. Thank you.
The next item is a two-part item, item BC 2019-631, Department of Information Technology. A, submitting an RP exemption on requisition 46654, which will result in an award recommendation to Northwoods Consulting Partners, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $237,584.47 for maintenance and support of on-base software for various departments, and it's for the period January 1st, 2019 through January 31st, 2020, and B, recommending the award and contract in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, Janelle Green, Department of IT. This item is for, again, support for our already existing on-base licenses. This support will carry us out through the end of January in anticipation for us to post an RFP for the services and have that in place at that time. So for a point of clarification, we presented an earlier item in regards to agenda manager, and that was for development work. And we decided that our IT developers would take care of that work in-house, but we do need to have the support for the licenses in place.
Okay, are there any questions related to this item? Mr. McAleer.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I know we sent over some prepared questions in advance, but, I just had some clarification on the responses. One of the answers related to if N4 has an available or similar product, it looks like the answer, they do not have an agenda management component.
That is correct. I wasn't sure of that response, so I did consult with Jack, who then in turn talked to N4 directly, who stated that they do not have any products such as that, and they do recommend that we go forth with the on-base item.
And the answer goes on to state about that a third product supplier, they do not have a third product supplier either that would be able to provide this, it looks like.
Yes, the whole response was that they talked to our senior sales account executive at N4, and they said that they do not have an agenda manager-like product, and they do not have a third product supplier that can interface into that product. And in their opinion, this is one of the best products in that market space.
So am I missing something if N4 doesn't have a product and N4 doesn't have a third product supplier, is Highland then our only option?
The on-base solution is from what I understand, is what our coding is based on. But Jack Ryan is here to provide further clarifications on that point.
If that's the case, then why would we even consider doing an RFP if that appears to be the only product available?
The RFP would be on providing support, support and maintenance, not on development work. So we actually already have the licenses. We would get support in order to maintain those licenses.
And then just one more question, I think, Mr. Chair, for now. If the issues surrounding the on-base product that we have ends up playing out with the potential of the outcome related to the ongoing investigation, if on-base is the only product, what's our plan if we can no longer use on-base?
Well, just for a point of clarification also, the licenses that we have in-house as well as the agenda manager license was already in place ahead of whatever may have happened and may have transpired that we have in the legal proceedings now. So we did go and research our licenses and agreements that we had. So from what we saw, the agenda manager licenses that we procured happened in probably 2014, 2015, ahead of whatever of these events transpired. So in terms of the work in question, I would have to refer that in terms of the legal situation would have to be referred over to the law department. I would not be privy to that information.
But not for legal, though. If this plays out with the potential of it playing out the way it could, if N4 doesn't have a product and there appears to be no third product supplier, and if we cannot use on-base moving forward, what's our solution?
Well, let me bring up Jack Ryan for that. Again, I wouldn't have that information.
Jack Ryan, ERP Program Director. I think there's a couple pieces to answer your question here, possibly. There's two different things we do with on-base. There's probably more than two, but a couple of, from an ERP perspective anyway. We do document storage. We use on-base for document storage for documents related to transactions that are going through the system. Hi, buddy. Okay. The other thing we do is we do the agenda manager piece, which is how all of this documentation gets delivered to council. So on the first point, when we, in the future, we don't have a specific date or plan right now, but at some point in time, after the ERP implementation, core implementation, we should look at an upgrade to the next version of Infor. And in that particular upgrade, Infor has the capability to do document storage inside that product. So we would reduce our dependence upon Highland at that point in time for that product. Okay, so that's, I don't know about 50%, but that's a big chunk of what we do with that license. Would it be, if the question is, would it be prudent in the intervening period of time to look at an alternative for agenda manager and what the council does? It probably would be. Nobody has looked closely at that at this point in time, given the timing and given that we have a dependence for ERP implementation on getting this done now. But I think that's in the interest of doing due diligence is probably something longer term we should take a look at. But Infor themselves don't have a product that they interface with, not that there's not other products in the marketplace, but they don't have any particular product that interfaces with their product suite right now. I hope that helps.
But, so Jack, just on that point, but Infor does interface with other third product agenda managers, right?
No, they do not have an interface with any other third party products right now.
Except for on-base.
Except for what we're doing with on-base, that's correct. Right now.
There's no other entity that has an agenda manager piece that uses Infor? Not
that they're aware of. I had a very direct conversation with Infor about this at the end of last week. So.
Do you know what then other solutions, other government agencies are using then for their agenda manager piece if they have Infor?
I do not at this point in time. I think that would be part of the due diligence going forward that we should probably take a look at. But I'm not sitting here right now today. I don't have that answer.
And it was, if I could, Mr. McAlero, that was one of the reasons that we had asked repeatedly for a number of years to go see in the Infor product being installed somewhere, but we were never given that opportunity.
It's interesting that we would pick a vendor if we've never seen that vendor interact with our current software when we were implementing the system. I just don't understand how we're,
Well, we have the same issue with the budget module because the budget module that was originally procured did not survive the testing, and Infor went out and acquired the services. Jack, you can maybe explain from Sherpa. So it would be a similar process. They would have to go out and find somebody that could fit into their software. I think at this point in time, it's because of the schedule moving forward that would put us back so far that it would be almost prohibitive to look at an alternative. But I won't put words in your mouth.
No, I agree with Dennis's assessment there. So at this point in time, to your point though, should we do the due diligence in this period of time while we have this maintenance contract in place that's on the table today, should we be looking at what our alternatives are? Absolutely, we should be doing that. Okay.
Councilwoman Baker first.
Okay, and I'm trying to follow this also. I guess I will ask the question. The period of time for the contract is 1/1/2019 to 1/31/2020. So we're now going into September. So first of all, why is this contract January 1st? And secondly, do we owe any funding from January 1st to today? I'll start there. Those two questions.
Okay, do you want to take that one? Or either one?
So, in order to not have lapses on our support and maintenance for the licenses, we were required to go back to January 1st. Prior to this whole scenario playing out, Highland did provide support from January up until July. So that may have rolled over into this particular agreement. When we selected the date of January 31st of 2020, we had the thought in mind of when we're going to procure another vendor, that we're looking at not having everything in at the same time because most of the IT contracts in the December 31st, and that puts an additional headache onto our department. So our decision to go over to into the end of January gives us time to put it in place, and we're not scrambling and trying to get all of our agreements to end at the same time. That was the only thought process behind that.
Okay, so instead of ending at the end of the year, we're ending in January. I get that.
Correct. And in terms of any funds are owed to Highland, that we've not had that conversation.
Okay.
And we are going under the assumption that this was lumped into this option because our reseller had to contact Highland in order to get pricing in place.
Can we get confirmation from you that between January 1st and going into September now, that there is no additional funds needed?
We should not, but we can get confirmation outside of this meeting.
Okay, so this $237,000 includes starting from the beginning of the year.
That is correct.
And they have been providing services.
Correct.
And if any payment's been given to them, it's on an old contract.
Correct. That ended December 31st of 18. Yes.
Okay. My other question here is the funding source is 60% general fund and 40% health and human services. Why did we take 40% of? How do we justify the health and human services part of it?
Well, there's but the on-base licenses are being used in HHS as well.
And aren't they being used in other departments?
Well, we've been taking the general fund aspect. The general fund will apply to, I think, fiscal has some aspects of it, definitely other, the procurement department. So that's when the general fund portion. The HHS portion is for their section. Like, for example, there's the child support tracking system that they're using. So that portion of the system is what licenses that they are using. So that's what that amount is, that 40% accounts for.
Okay. Okay. Let me just get one more in if I can. The description calls for maintenance and support of on-base software, but are we talking about maintenance support or are we talking about licensing?
We're talking about maintenance and support.
Okay, so there are no licenses in this
No,
proposal?
there are no new licenses that are in this agreement.
Okay, that's it for now.
Councilman Miller.
I know that Ms. Baker asked why the contract was backdated to January 1st of 2019, but I did not understand the answer, so could you try that again?
So when we have support, we have to maintain for continuity. So that's why we have the maintenance and support has to go from the date when the last contract ended. So that starts again in January 1st of 2019.
And of the $237,584.47, could you give me an estimate of how much of that money will be for services provided from January 1st of 2019 through today's date, and how much will be for services to be provided from tomorrow's date through 1/31 of 2020?
We can give you the monthly breakdown in the spreadsheet as far as how much that is. I didn't have that with me, that calculation.
Is a substantial portion of it for services that have already been provided?
We get an amount per license that we have. There's a support number that correlates with the direct license that we have. So we would just essentially take that amount divided by the 13 months and give a monthly figure based upon that.
So am I deducing correctly that the cost will be essentially prorated over the entire 13-month period, so that it would be approximately $20,000 per month or so, a little more or less?
It should be broken out over the duration of the 13 months.
So you're saying it would be approximately equally divided from month to month?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me, describe the kind of work that is involved, that has to take place to maintain these licenses, that it costs $20,000 plus a month to do it?
I wouldn't have that information. We have John Scheffler. He is the manager of the on-base team.
Yeah, so what that provides you is the ability to create support tickets and also maintain the system itself, the servers and the licenses within it.
So could you describe what the work entails? How many people are employed doing this work? What kind of work do they do? I have no idea what this work involves.
Okay, so we, in terms of the on-base team, we have 3 on-base administrators. One on-base administrator supports the child support applications that we talked about earlier, and the other 2 support all the activity on the county side, such as ERP and the document recorder's office as well.
So when you say that you support the work, that's a very generic term. Could you kind of be more concrete and explain what somebody would actually do to support these things?
Yeah, so basically there's server environment infrastructure that you have to maintain and support. We build a number of workflows, which are basically a way to basically get approvals through, so in the procurement system now that's run through OnBase, there's a number of approval steps that you would have to build. So within the OnBase tool set, you have a Unity client and you can build different types of workflows and configurations within these tool sets.
So is this basically programming work?
Configuration type programming work, yeah.
And you said that you were planning to put out an RFP for these services to begin 2/1 of 2020 for the next round. How many suppliers are we aware of that are out there that could provide these services?
Is that about 10 or 15?
From what we saw on we used the Ohio State term contract as a reference. We saw probably at least 10 to 12. And we did reach out for multiple quotes for this procurement, and we only had a few get back to us.
So, how many quotes did we get on this item?
We received 3 quotes.
And how much did the pricing vary?
The pricing was around the same amount, with the exception of Northwoods was the cheapest. Most of the vendors were to charge a reinstatement fee. That Northwoods was the only vendor that waived that fee.
Okay.
Mr. McAleer?
You know, on or about July 8th, at the Board of Control agenda, there was that Highland contract that was held. If that one was approved, would that have covered the services that are being provided under this contract?
No. So we had a number of agreements with Highland for services. So we had the agenda manager. The agenda manager contract was for development work in order to code the system in order for to customize the system for us. So that was one part of the contract. Another part of the contract was the support and maintenance for the various agreements that we had for, the various licenses that we had for just all the general licenses that we have that are used for used by procurement, fiscal, whomever, and then also the portion for child support. And then we had another agreement that was separate from that, was for the child support development work that we also canceled when we presented to the Finance Committee. So the agenda manager and the child support tracking system development were the ones that were canceled. We were going to have to present on-base support and maintenance going forward.
And did you say that Highland was providing services after January 1 till about July
That is correct.
without a contract?
Yes.
Follow up on that.
Councilwoman Baker.
So to follow up on that question, why is it that we allowed that gap to take place to receive services, knowing that we didn't have them under contract and we waited 8 months?
Well, Highland offered that service. The reason why we were so behind on getting the contract renewed was from working with their end. Their legal didn't sign over the quotes back. There was a lot of back and forth with their legal department. So that gap in time was not something, in terms of getting a contract executed, was not something that happened on our end. That was on their end. So by the time we got everything set and back, we presented in July, and that was declined. So we had to move forward with a new option.
All right, if I may follow. So given that we believe that there won't be any funding due them, that they're using existing money to pay for between January and now, and we're picking the date 1/31/2020 because it's easier for us to manage it, why can't we make this contract as of September 1st, given that the funding looks like it's already covered, and we're picking a date here at the end anyway, so the continuity of ending one contract with another doesn't seem to be as important, because we're creating a date of 1/31/2020 for our convenience. So why can't we make this September 1st and start the loan or the dollar amount of $237 to cover from that point forward? Is there a reason why we have to go back to January 1st?
I don't have that response for you. We have to go back and consult about that.
We haven't had that particular discussion with Northwood or Highland, but it's not unusual. In fact, almost every software vendor that resells licensed software requires you to be, sort of goes back to an earlier question, requires you to be continuously under product support for them to continue product support. So I'm going to guess that if we went back and asked that question, they would say the effective date of the support needs to go all the way back to January 1st, so that we reflect in the contract the continual support that we're actually being charged for. I believe that's the right answer to that.
Go ahead.
Councilman Miller.
You said that Highland effectively provided the service, at least from January 1st through July of this year. But then it was also stated that the $237,584 would be essentially close to evenly prorated over the 13 months, which means that we would be paying again for services from January 1st through July of this year for services that had already been provided by Highland. Why would we have to pay again for the same services?
Well, we never paid for the services from January 1st forward anyway. So it's not, you're not paying for it twice. You're paying for coverage.
But if the services were already provided for January 1st through July of this year, why would we have to pay somebody else to provide those services during that time frame, because those services had already been provided?
If I understand the question, I think it all boils down to having to provide, as part of their licensing agreements and their support agreements, I guess, you've got to provide continuous support. So whether you pay through a third-party provider or whether you pay Highland directly, you've got to pay for that continuous support period. That's part of their licensing and support agreements.
Well, but you said that the work that was provided from January through July was paid for by money that was available from a previous contract, and so that the services were already provided. If the services were already provided, why do you have to pay for them again?
The services that we got for support and maintenance were not paid for. So we had development work that was done, and that was paid for. Well, portions of that were paid for prior to. They would have been paid in this year, but it was for work that occurred in 2018. So we haven't provided payment for any vendor for any of the support services that were provided in 2019.
You said previously that Highland provided the services without a contract from January through July of this year.
Correct.
So normally when services are provided, even if it's without a contract, there's rights that do we owe them for these services?
So conversations with Highland in regards to funds owed or anything like that have not occurred.
Yeah, but normally if somebody provides services in good faith, we have at least a moral and often a legal obligation to pay those services. My question is, are we going to have an obligation to pay Highland Software for January through July? And if we do, we're certainly not going to want to pay Northwoods to provide the same services in the same time frame.
The specific answer to your question, the direct answer is I don't think we don't have a legal opinion on that at this point in time. I guess that would be the question. I would add that based on the way my experience and the way software maintenance contracts work, I'd be since we are paying for third-party support and they're a reseller of that support, we are in fact paying for the support indirectly to Highland. They're going to, there'll be some reseller agreement for those support services that Highland will benefit from. So I would be surprised to see any action from Highland for that previous January through July period, because we're paying the reseller of those same services. So that would be like paying for it twice, and I would not expect that we would either want to do that, nor would I expect them to pursue that.
Hey, Jack, if I could, are you basically saying that by payment of this through Northwoods, that releases us from any liability to pay Highland, because Northwoods will compensate Highland for any work that was done during those first? I mean, that's what I'm hearing that you're
That
saying.
would be my understanding. Again, I'm not privy to the contract of the reseller contract between Northwoods and Highland directly, but that would be a normal reseller kind of an arrangement. Yes.
So I guess to the councilman's point, I mean, he's concerned that we would pay Northwoods, and then we would potentially maybe have a liability to Highland for any work that was performed also, unless this agreement would contain language that would cover us, right? Is that law department?
Jared Zabrotowski, Law Department. From what I make, from what Jack is saying, that it would be correct, that the service would be paid for through Northwoods with whatever agreement they have with Highland.
So that would limit our liability, or I think that's, Councilman Miller, that's what you're trying to get at?
Yes. I'm not willing to vote for this today based on the presumption of how we think business would normally operate. I think we need to get this stuff nailed down so that we know exactly what we're paying for and how we're paying for it.
So the specific concern here is to get a release of liability for that previous period of time from Highland or from the third-party reseller, indirectly having that agreement from Highland?
Yeah, just to nail down a payment arrangement that guarantees we're not going to be paying for the same services twice.
Okay.
Mr. McAleer?
Has Highland billed us for any of the services provided from January to July?
No.
Were there any discussions with them about sending us any invoices?
No.
And so if this contract was the one different from the one in July for the type of service we're getting, why, if you brought forward Highland in July, why didn't we bring Highland forward for this service, either between January 1 or July?
Well, these were 3 separate agreements from Highland that we were going to have. Again, the one for agenda manager, one for the support services, and then one for child support. So we were going in order by which we received them, just to get them out. So we got the agenda manager one first, and we processed that. Once we were declined from that one, we stopped processing the other items.
That was also 7 months, though, after the end date. So it wasn't like it was, I just don't understand why we're now nearly September, 9 months into this year. We're talking about a contract from July that was also 7 months late.
Correct.
We're gonna owe, in some form or fashion, Highland is going to get money from this contract.
Right. So as I stated previously, was that we had some back and forth with their law department. So we processed the items as we got it in from their law department. So it was severely late. But as soon as we got it in, we started processing it for approval.
When did we start processing it?
I would have to go back and look at the specific dates, but we would have put it into the system probably in June when we got it, and then goes through the approval processes between all the departments. As part of the procurement.
June of 18 or June of 19?
19.
So we started our process 6 months after the end date?
In terms of when we got the quotes back, but we would have started doing all of the agreements, and we looked at consolidation of licenses, which is what we did.
But this one's not about license. This one isn't license. This isn't dealing with license, correct?
This one, we had to consolidate licenses to determine which support services we were going to need. We weren't going to need support services on licenses we were no longer going to use. So we had to look at what we were actually going to use and then go forth with a procurement process from those items that we were going to use. And that happened, that started last summer in 18.
But I just don't understand with the public issues and concerns about the relationship between us and the vendor, why we wouldn't have started this process. And if it's so important to the entire ERP project and to keep the timeline going, why we wouldn't have started this process earlier. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Go ahead.
I mean, I don't have a response for that. Again, we started it in August of 2018. I don't know, and maybe Scheffler can speak to what the process was for Agenda Manager, but we did start that with the intention of renewing the services from Highland, and unfortunately it got caught in back and forth with their legal department.
I mean, I think that is the short answer, is it got hung up in their legal department and in terms of trying to get a response back. So based on the circumstances surrounding this issue.
I don't think it was hung up in their legal department for 6 months, but it could be. I wasn't part of the process.
All right, Councilwoman Baker.
Verification. The question that seems to be giving us the most angst here is one that was posed as a preliminary question, and that was, how much would Highland say we owe them from 1/1/19 to present for the maintenance and support of OnBase? And the answer back, which I don't think I've heard much different, this is not something they have asked, and we cannot speculate as to how much they would charge or if they would charge.
So with the interpretation of the question states, how much would they say that we owed them? We didn't have that conversation with them. So the response was, we haven't had that conversation to know yet. But we, as Jack stated, there is the anticipation that it's rolled into this agreement with Northwoods, and Northwoods, again, with whatever agreement that they have with them, would supply payment.
So I would agree with Councilman Miller that I think we should get a definitive answer, that there aren't any funds out there that they're going to bill us for between January 1st and today. And I would really, I hear what you're saying about dating this January 1st, but if we can at all get it dated the appropriate date, which would be September 1st, I think that would be a more realistic timeline for us to know if we ever went back to review these licenses or the maintenance, that we can say, yes, it started in September, not in January.
Well, the agreement itself, we have it dated for the date of this meeting. So there were two contracts that were in the system in OnBase. The last version of this contract, which we got corrected, the original did say January 1st. We amended the contract to state as a meeting of this meeting date of 8/26.
But the contract date is going to remain 1/1, isn't it?
The contract date is the date of this meeting. The quote for the period of performance is from 1/1 to 1/31.
So if I may, does that mean that there cannot be any payments made? If they billed us for something in March and said, oops, I forgot that we did this service for you, is this contract, will this contract cover it because it's actually dated 1/1, even though we approved it today and it's written for today? What do they read? What obligation do they read as far as what we potentially could owe them in time spent between January and today? Will you be surprised if you got a bill tomorrow?
From Northwoods for something that happened in March? Yes. Because we would have an invoice dated sometime after today, or the approval date, for what was in the quote.
And that, say they dated it September 1st for March services. Would you be surprised at that?
Yes, I would be surprised to see that from Northwoods.
Okay. I guess there's just a little bit of, I'd like to get, it just would be good to have a absolute on that we aren't going to be surprised. We're now within contract dates. It happened between January and end of July, so we owe them per this. I'm not sure what argument we would have to say, we thought we were already paid, we thought you were using old money, and that our contract starts today as of the approval. That, I just don't want to see any of that because we are agreeing to a January 1st date. That's.
And to your point, I mean, I think Northwoods is expecting to get paid from January 1, 2019 to July 31st, 2020.
Per the testimony, they have already or will be paid from old money, not from today's $237,000.
No, what I said was the contract date is from 8/26, but it covers the period of performance from January 1 through January 31st of 2020. That's what I stated.
Can we have a contract date that starts on a certain date but goes back? I don't understand. I don't understand that. Wouldn't it have to be backdated to January 1, 2019 if we're going to pay for services? Back to January 1, 2019?
If I could, number of questions about here. How about if we just make a decision to hold this, and then we can coordinate a meeting to get everybody's questions answered, because I think there seems confusion. Councilman Miller.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I want to put one other question on the table. Preliminarily, what was the last date that services were provided by Highland?
What's the last time?
I'd have to check. I think maybe
And my question is, were any services provided in this area from the date that Highland stopped providing services and today's date?
Were there any services provided from when Highland stopped services? So they haven't.
no, nothing from when the in July, whenever we brought the.
So whenever Highland stopped providing services, no services have been provided from then until today's date.
Correct.
So we also, as this seems to be structured, we could be paying for services over a time frame when no one's services were in fact provided. That doesn't sound right either.
I think this all goes back to the same premise that the services, support services that we're talking about, by the nature of the licensing agreements, initially have to be continuously provided back to, and that's the reason for the backdating of the contract. All these questions come back to that one premise.
Well, I'm willing to buy that, but if no actual services were provided, the charge should be minimal as opposed to $20,000+ per month. That should be a matter of negotiation.
It's you could be, but normally they have a support service fee that is part of their standard licensing agreement, and I'd have to go back and look at the language for that. But I'm assuming that's we're proceeding under their normal licensing agreement, which is a fixed amount that covers so much all the way back to a certain period of time. So we'd have to go back and look at that. We can get I understand the need for a release from liability so we don't get billed twice. Sounds like there's another question, which is, can we do a partial payment because incremental services were provided, or however you want to word that, some services were provided between January and July. Normally, that's not the case for licensing agreements with software vendors. Normally, you have support, it's there and available, And it's up, to whatever extent you decide you need to use that or call upon that. And that's what was going on in that period of time. Highland provided or had those services available up to the point where it became obvious that we were not going to renew that.
Mr. McAleer, do you have a final question?
When we got the draft contract back in June from Highland for these services, what was the dollar amount that they were proposing the contract be?
When we got the quote for maintenance, it was for these licenses, it's around the same amount. I'd have to go back and look for that, though.
You just let me know, Janelle.
All right. Would it be the consensus then that we should hold this item until at least next week, pending some exchange information or a meeting to go over some questions? Is that, Mr. Dunbar, you have any objections to that? Lenora, any objections?
I do have a question for the committee. So we have a contract drafted in a certain way. What's, I believe, is being asked for as the primary concern is a release from liability or a statement from either Highland or the third-party supplier saying that we're not going to get charged twice for that. So if we come back next week, with the statement, with a separate statement, not having to go back and modify the contract again, will that be sufficient for the committee?
Jack, not to speak for the committee, but that's the purpose of us following up and having a meeting. So we're not, you can't ask us a question contingent on how it's going to show up next Monday.
Okay.
Or Tuesday. That's what we're going to use the week for to get that resolved.
Okay. We just want to make sure we come back with the right information. Okay.
Andreas, you can make a note to hold this item?
Yes, we're holding item number BC 2019-631 for 1 week.
Okay. We're done with this. Want to move on to the next item then, please?
Next item is a two-part item, item number BC 2019-632, Department of Information Technology. A, submitting an RFP exemption on requisition 46330, which will result in an award recommendation to Microsoft Corporation in the amount not to exceed $60,486.79 for the purchase of 26 Microsoft Surface Pro 6i5 tablets and related accessories for use by various departments. And B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Janelle Green, Department of IT. This request is for 26 Surface Pros, 10 for the IT department, 11 for the Sheriff's Office, and 5 for Veteran Service Commission. We procured this item through the Texas DIR Cooperative. We've used this vendor and this procurement method before as they include training, free training for individuals and groups for use of the Surface item. And these products are for the departments to increase mobility. These would be computer or workstation replacements for those that are using computers in their departments.
Questions on this item? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McAleer, I believe. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved.
Next item, item number BC 2019-633 is a two-part item. Department of Health and Human Services, A, submitting an RP exemption on requisition 46655, which will result in an award recommendation to RCAP Security, LLC, in the amount not to exceed $66,000 for fingerprinting and criminal background check services for approximately 1,200 employees using or accessing federal tax information, and it's for the period August 26, 2019 through October 15, 2019, and B, recommending the award in connection with said RFP exemption.
Good morning, Dan Basta, Health and Human Services. This item is for BCI and FBI fingerprinting for the Department of Health and Human Services, in particular 2 agencies, the Office of Child Support Services and Job and Family Services. This is a time-sensitive item because we need to have 1,200 full-time HHS employees in these two departments fingerprinted by September 30th. This is according to Ohio Administrative Code, which is pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code. It states basically that any of our employees that have access to federal tax information need to have thorough background checks, both BCI and FBI. The reason they have this as an exemption is because it's for professional services and they need to be certified in both BCI and FBI fingerprinting. Be happy to answer any questions regarding this item.
Any questions on this item? Councilman Miller?
Was there any kind of competitive process on this election?
We did initially ask the agency how much they would charge for these fingerprints. They originally stated $76. We negotiated it down because we found that there were other vendors that were able to provide it at a discounted rate, so we actually got it down to $55. So originally we tried to get it, they were trying to get us for $76 per fingerprint, but we got them down to $55.
Is there any reason why this one particular company has to be used instead of just bidding it out and going with the lowest and best?
We just decided to do it as an exemption because we had to get these professional services provided because of the deadline of September 30th.
So are you saying that other companies couldn't meet the deadline?
I'm saying that process would have taken us into September and we wouldn't have been able to meet the deadline of September 30th.
Could you have done informal bids?
Not because it ended up being over $50,000, it wouldn't have been an informal bid. It would have been a formal bid process.
Councilwoman Baker?
Can you remind me again on the fingerprinting that we approved, time flies, 2 weeks, a month ago, that HR asked for funding, and there were two sources, I believe, that we were told at the time we went through. I'm not sure what the first one was, but the second was for us to also follow up to make sure that background checks were being done. And so I guess I'm just wondering, how does this play into that? And I understand your answer is that this isn't for federal access.
Correct.
But remind me again of what we approved that does not include this federal.
I'm not really sure of the human resources aspect of it, but for Health and Human Services, they basically have told us that anyone that has the federal tax information, access to federal tax information, needs to be both fingerprinted from the BCI, Bureau of Criminal Investigations, as well as the FBI, because they need to have both federal and state verification that they don't have any type of crimes that include like fraudulent activity, stuff like that, theft,
Okay.
financial crimes.
So you're confident that there's no double work being done here, that
There
we're
is
not
not.
through?
Yeah, we did, the Department of Health and Human Services did their due diligence to make sure that these individuals were not only BCI checked, but FBI checked. Most of them had the BCI check because that's what they go through to get hired,
Right.
but they did not have the FBI check.
Okay.
Councilman Miller?
I'm going to vote for this in order to keep the trains running. But my problem with this is that an RFP exemption covers a lot of things. You can do an RFP exemption a lot of different ways, and I think a better exemption could have been devised. One that created an expedited but yet truly competitive process as opposed to the one that you did. And I would just like to to put that out there to everybody for consideration in the future.
Understood.
Mr. Meckler?
And just to follow up from Councilman Miller's questioning, when did we know about the September 30th deadline?
I believe we were made aware in May, so we had to basically vet our staff to find out who had been BCI and FBI fingerprinted. So that's what kind of brought us to this point. So we had to involve law to make sure that we were complying with the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Administrative Code. So that brought us to this point. We definitely needed to get it in as fast as possible because we don't want to hit that September 30th deadline. If we do, it could be detrimental to our services as well as collecting federal tax monies for child support and stuff and situations like that.
And we have to do this every 10 years?
We have to do it every 10 years, but after this particular area, I believe that the Human Resources is going to be taking over that so that anybody that's hired from Job and Family or OCSS will be given the FBI and BCI background checks.
Thanks.
Sure.
Councilwoman Baker?
Just real quick on the notations that were asked, this is a new state requirement?
Yes,
Okay, and so this next time, and did we say every 10 years?
every 10 years, correct.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments about this item? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, item BC 2019-634, Department of Health and Human Services, submitting a cooperation grant agreement with Ohio Department of Health in the amount not to exceed $65,536 for the provision of fiscal agent services for public health activities associated with the Tuberculosis Control Program, and it's for the period July 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018.
Chantel McCurdy, Office of Health and Human Services. This is an agreement between the Cuyahoga County and the Department of Health that covers the cost of the TB control and prevention program within the county, and the services are administered by Metro Health. Metro Health basically does the services, and they send an invoice to the state of the amount that the services cost, and then the state sends us the funds, and we pay Metro Health for those services for that program.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Councilwoman Baker?
So if I'm reading these dates correctly, it's from July of last year that ended December of last year.
Yes.
And I'm trying to read your explanation as to why we're paying for a program that's almost a year old. And what about 2019? Will you be coming forward for a 2019 contract?
Yes, we haven't gotten the agreement for the 2019 yet. We usually get this agreement around November or December of the year from the state, saying that they have, and they'll say the amount that was allocated to our county. So we got the agreement last year around November or December. Metro Health sends the invoice. So they'll send us a copy, and they send it also to the state, usually by like the end of January, beginning of February, saying how much these services cost them for the year. And then we receive a check, and once we receive a check, we pay Metro Health. Well, this year the check was sent to the down to the administration building, but it didn't have like attention anyone, so the check was lost in traffic. So once I discovered that we hadn't received the check yet, I contacted the state for us to get a void and duplicate check when, we couldn't find it. And we got the duplicate check at the end of June. And so once we got the duplicate check, we deposited. We had to go and request for appropriation through OBM because once, we knew exactly what the amount was, and that was what brought us to this period.
Okay.
In the future,
Yes.
I will, once the agreement comes to us in November, I'll start this process. And also, I signed up for direct deposit with the Department of Health, so that should stop the lost check, thing. So once they cut the check, we'll probably be around first quarter. At least we won't have to look for the check. We'll be able to go ahead with this process.
Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved. Thank you.
Next item is a two-part item. Item number BC 2019-635, Department of Health and Human Services. A, submitting an RP exemption on requisition 46469, which will result in a payment to Metro Health System in the amount not to exceed $65,536 for reimbursement of services rendered for public health activities associated with the Tuberculosis Control Program for the period July 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2018. And B, recommending the payment in connection with said RP exemption.
Chantel McCurdy, Health and Human Services. Again, this is the same item. It's just the first one was requesting a permission to receive the funds. Am I correct, Lenore? And this is just permission to pay Metro Health for those services.
Questions? Hearing none, I'll move the item for approval. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2019-636, Department of Health and Human Services, Community Initiatives Division, Office of Homeless Services, submitting an amendment to a contract with Fair Hill Partners for emergency shelter services for homeless families and individuals in connection with the fiscal year 2018 Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and is for the period September 1st, 2018 through August 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to August 31st, 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $22,500.
Good morning, Shari Ware, Office of Homeless Services. This amendment will extend the contract with Fair Hill Partners for 1 year for the same amount that they are currently under contract for. Fair Hill's senior shelter provides emergency shelter services for older adults who are fleeing elder abuse or who are experiencing a housing crisis. And so we did an RFP for this last year, and this just extends it 1 more year.
Any questions on this item? I have one. How many people get served under this particular contract, If?
The shelter can serve eight adults at a point in time. Occasionally they squeeze in another one, but in general they serve 8. Over the course of 12 months, they served 43 people.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2019-637, Department of Health and Human Services, Community Initiatives Division, Office of Early Childhood, submitting an amendment to a contract with Pascal Learning, Inc., doing business as Ready Rosie, for the purchase of web-based subscription services for customized child development videos, and is for the period September 1st, 2017 through August 31st, 2019, to extend the time period to August 31st, 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $42,840.
Good afternoon. Again, this is a contract amendment with Pascal Learning, doing business as Ready Rosie. Ready Rosie produces short 2 to 3 minute educational videos. Our UPK teachers choose videos which correspond to their weekly lesson plans, and they push them out to their families. This helps to reinforce in the home what the children are learning in the classroom.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved. Thank you.
Next item, BC 2019-638, Court of Common Pleas, Juvenile Court Division, submitting an amendment to a contract with Ohio Guidestone for high-fidelity wraparound case management services. And it's for the period September 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2020, to change the scope of services to include program outcomes and reporting requirements effective August 26, 2019, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $62,902.36.
Good morning, this is Sarah Baker from Juvenile Court. This program here is part of our competitive reclaim grant, and this will provide wraparound case management services. The referrals are coming from our diversion department as well as our home detention department. And they'll provide various case management services, kind of link the families up to any services they may need in the community or help them get to various appointments, things like that.
Okay, any questions? Sarah, what is high fidelity wraparound?
It's actually like an evidence-based program versus maybe just traditional case management program. So this case management program that Ohio Guidestone has, which is the high fidelity, they're actually going to be monitored by Case Western Reserve University to make sure that they're adhering to the various modules that they're providing. Whereas traditional case management, there's no fidelity to that fidelity monitoring at all.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Next item is a two-part item, item number BC 2019-639, Court of Common Pleas, Juvenile Court Division. A, submitting an RP exemption on requisition 46429, which will result in an award recommendation to George Junior Republic in Pennsylvania in the amount not to exceed $60,000 for residential treatment services for one youth for the period July 29th, 2019 through July 28th, 2020. And B, recommending the award and contract in connection with said RP exemption.
Sarah Baker with Juvenile Court. This is an individualized contract with George Junior Republic. We had one particular youth on one of our dockets that needed residential treatment. We tried to refer him out to all of the court contracted residential facilities that we had, and no other facility would take him. However, George Junior agreed to take him. So we did an individual contract for just this one youth to be placed there. We're actually going to be splitting the costs for this youth to attend this facility with DCFS.
Okay, any questions on this item? Oh, yes, Councilwoman Baker.
Just to make sure I understand, so these services were provided at the end of July, beginning the end of July?
Yes, the youth was actually transported on July 29th, and as soon as we were made aware that the courtroom wanted to send the youth, we quickly got a contract out to George Junior. However, they wanted to remove the youth from the detention center because that's where he had been housed. So they transported him on the 29th to the facility.
So there hasn't been any money exchanged up
No
until
money,
today?
just services.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. McAleer.
There is the $60,000 the court's half, or is that the total contract between us and DCFS and Juvenile Court?
This is actually just our portion. George Junior is going to invoice separately the court and DCFS, so this is just for our portion.
And then do you know what happens after July 28, 2020?
I'm hoping that the youth will be back in Cuyahoga County and will no longer need treatment. If something were to happen where his stay needed to be extended, or oftentimes the per diem rates may change based upon the programming that the youth are receiving, so we would just have to amend it.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved.
Next item, BC 2019-640, Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Court Division, submitting an amendment to a contract with Case Western Reserve University, Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences for evaluation services for the period September 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2019, to extend the time period to June 30th, 2020, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $18,000.
Sarah Baker, Juvenile Court. This amendment is for our evaluation services with Case Western Reserve. They're evaluating our competitive reclaim grant, and it's a requirement of that grant that we have an evaluation component. There's one more year left on this term. What they're going to be evaluating is the high fidelity wraparound services as well as the court's community-based intervention center.
Thank you. Any questions on this item?
I have one.
Councilwoman Baker.
So tell me, try to read this correctly. Metro Health will be taking this particular services over in October? I
don't think that's for our item.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Sorry.
That's okay.
I thought it was a little odd. Okay. Got it.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval will indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, BC 2019-641, Sheriff's Department, submitting an amendment to a contract with Alliance Healthcare Solutions, LLC, for temporary nursing services for all county jail medical facilities. And it's for the period March 4th, 2019 through December 31st, 2019, for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $300,000.
Good morning, Tanisha Gakes with the Sheriff's Department, and I am requesting an amendment to the contract to add the funds of $300,000 for the temporary nursing services that we currently use and are still using at the jail. We are anticipating Metro Health to take over staffing completely in October, but in the meantime, they're using the temporary nursing staff to augment the difference needed there.
Okay, now I will ask, that's what I get for jumping ahead. So the Metro is involved in the jails now. They are supervising all of the nurses. But the funding does not begin until October. So they're in practice but not being accountable for the nursing staff as far as funding.
Can you repeat that? Because I kind of understand, but I think I may have misunderstood just a little.
Well, let me read your answer. We are expecting Metro to completely take over the jail medical staff by October. So does that mean they're not right now taking over the medical staff?
Right, they have not completely taken over. They are still using the temporary nurses with Alliance and I believe Educare, but they were able to come to an agreement with Educare, and they've sort of taken over the Educare temporary nurses while they weren't able to come in agreement with Alliance for their nurses because of a finder's fee, which was not included in their original contract. So we're looking for additional funds under our contract with Alliance to continue to provide those services.
So given we are now going into September, and this is going to take effect in October for Metro to be responsible for the nurses, is this $300,000 then just for 1 month?
Well, it should carry us through to October, definitely. They're averaging about $20,000 to $40,000 a week in invoices for Alliance nurses.
Okay, and reading your contract dates, it's March 4th, 2019 to 12/31, 2019?
That is the original contract dates.
And that $300,000 was to fit in between those two?
Those dates, yes.
Okay. So are we exhausted, the money?
Oh, yes.
Mr. McAleer.
How many more nurses does Metro Health need to hire to get fully staffed where we wouldn't need this contract?
I can get that answer for you, but I would not know off the top of my head.
And with this $300,000, what it could would be the backup, I apologize. What's the total contract amount with Alliance?
I wasn't involved in the original contract, but I know that this would be the first amendment, and I can get that number for you as well.
Andrea?
Maybe in.
I'm sorry, Andrea, Office of Procurement and Diversity. The original amount under the first contract was $500,000. Including this would bring the total up to $800,000.
Correct.
And then do you by chance have the total dollar amount for Educare that we've had for temporary nurses?
I wasn't involved in that one either, so but I can get that for you.
Please. Thank you.
And I just had a quick question. If Metro's taking over October 1st, why would we not change the contract end date of this one?
Well, this is their original contract date. At the end of these funds, once they're depleted, we wouldn't need the services anymore as long as Metro fully.
But we're not anticipating on spending money on nurses past October 1st,
That's
correct?
correct.
So anything that's left over at the end of September could be liquidated, basically, right? 'Cause
Absolutely.
I know there was a lot of discussion about these. Okay, any other questions on this item? Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
So, following that line of questioning and understanding that different from what it was perhaps in March 4th, 2019, because we may have still been negotiating and figuring out how Metro is going to play into this, why not now take the opportunity to end this contract date October 1st, 2019, just to define when it should in fact end, given we have the clarity now of Metro's services?
I guess we are more so hoping and anticipating Metro Health to take over. We don't have an exact date for that, and I guess it would be more so to play it safe to keep it in place until the end of December, and if needed, which hopefully we're aiming not to need any more funds for this contract or any other temporary nursing.
So are we on, do we have the understanding that we are not under contract as of October 1st, 2019 then? Is that still something that has not been resolved? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I don't have an exact date. We were saying by the end of October that Metro Health should have taken over fully with the staffing.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr. McAleer.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add, Nan, I think the issue that Metro Health is currently facing, I don't have the numbers offhand, so I'm just estimating, but if they were supposed to have 50 nurses on staff, they're currently maybe only at 40. So this contract will cover the difference. And just in our weekly calls with Metro and the sheriff's folks, their goal was to try to be fully staffed by the middle of October. But they're not there yet. So there's potential that it could go into November or December. If they're not fully staffed, they will still use this contract to make sure the nursing staff is adequate.
So I guess I'm just concerned that we don't enter into a contract with Metro and still, instead of using Metro's dollars, we are using this contract dollars when perhaps what we agreed upon was for Metro to take over at the end of October. I mean, that's all I'm saying is that, do we need to have an end?
That was already included in the contract with Metro and the start date, I believe, for that, and somebody may be able to clarify that, was around first or second quarter of this year. But they are still using these temporary nurses and should be fully staffed.
We're currently under contract with Metro. I think the effective date might have been around April. They bill us on an actual basis. So if they were supposed to have 50 nurses, they're only going to bill us for the 40 that they have on staff.
Okay.
So we're not double paying
Right.
for nursing services. And then as they get to the fully staffed, then they'll start billing us that number. But in the contract, it allowed some flexibility for them to have the onboarding process move forward.
Okay.
So it didn't say as soon as the contract was effective, you have to have all 50 nurses on staff. It was
Okay.
with the goal of the October timeframe to try to be fully staffed.
All right, so there's no concern of an overlap then, of a, one contract continues, another contract starts, and there's a gap of time that both are in place.
No, because right now technically both are in place. Metro's got so many nurses on staff, and then we're using nurses from this temporary contract. And the total amount of nurses haven't changed as the original plan, but it's just what vendor, Metro, or in this case, Alliance, is providing. That we also have a third or second temporary nurses contract with Educare that we're still using. Now, Metro Health was able to come to an agreement with them
Right.
to kind of shift that contract from the county over to Metro Health, but as Tanisha pointed out, there's some issues that Alliance is hesitant about shifting that contract over to Metro.
All right, and I certainly understand the need to make sure we have the nurses there
Absolutely.
to add for the service.
Thank you for that clarification, too.
Okay, any other questions related to this item? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the item. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? The item is approved.
Thank you.
So that was the last scheduled item, I believe. Now to...
We're moving on to exemptions.
Exemptions.
Item number BC 2019-642, Department of Development, recommending an alternative procurement process which will result in a large-scale incentive grant agreement to Consolidated Precision Products, Cleveland, Inc., in the amount not to exceed $300,000 for construction of a new advanced manufacturing facility located at 26855 Bluestone Boulevard, permanent parcel number 648-08004 in Euclid, Ohio, for a 3-year period.
Good morning. Michael May, Department of Development. This is a request for a key piece of incentive funding assistance for a new advanced manufacturing facility project, which will create 128 new manufacturing and engineering jobs within Cuyahoga County and the city of Euclid. Creating this project is Consolidated Precision Products Corporation, a leading manufacturer of highly engineered castings and subassembly components for the commercial, aerospace, defense, and industrial markets. The funding request is for a not to exceed $300,000 large-scale leveraging incentive grant from the county's Job Creation Fund. It'll be used for funding for machinery and equipment components of the overall $59 million construction project. It's a 140,000 square foot facility being constructed in the Bluestone Business Park. It's Bluestone Boulevard is the main boulevard in the city of Cleveland of the park. Essentially, early in the year, the CPP had executed a 10-year contract with one of the major original equipment manufacturers in the aerospace industry to supply them with super alloy castings. And to accommodate this growth, the company needed to construct a new facility that featured state-of-the-art robotic and automation technology to produce in-demand, top-quality products at competitive prices for this and other customers. The company was considering numerous options for investing and locating this critical new facility, including company locations that it had in Syracuse, New York, Los Angeles, Salem, Oregon, Minneapolis, Minnesota, among others. Basically amounted to what was a national competition that the corporation was putting on for investing in this facility and what community. We had extensive talks with the company led by Greater Cleveland Partnership and Cuyahoga County. Also, Team Neo was involved, and obviously the city of Euclid. And we basically, again, this was early in the spring. What was put together was a compelling package of incentives and competitive features, such as for the community, such as workforce innovation, local state expertise in aerospace and aviation, and so on. This was able to convince CPP to make the investment here in Northeast Ohio, and the decision was made for Euclid based upon the strengths of those commitments. Essentially, I don't know, the on-base repository does have the specifics of the grant agreement. I don't know, we had some handouts to pass out there around. Okay, great. Those terms and conditions of the grant are listed in that sort of executive summary, and as well as descriptions of the various incentives and assistance items that are being offered by the other public and private partners in this collaborative effort. And again, I have we can go over those in more detail. I do have I have representatives from Consolidated, Roy Shulman, the company's CFO, and Kelly DeRico, the global controller, as well as representatives from City of Euclid and from Greater Cleveland Partnership. At this point, I'll ask for questions if you have them, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, Councilman Miller?
First of all, I'd like to thank CPP for choosing Cleveland for this development location. My question is, what other forms of government assistance are included in the financing stack?
Several, Councilman Miller. We've got essentially we've got the City of Euclid is providing a CRA real estate tax abatement that is valued at over $14 million over 15 years.
Valued at how much?
$14 million. Yeah. Over the next 15 years to support the project. The Ohio Tax Credit Authority has just approved an 8-year job creation tax credit for the project that's estimated at about $1.17 million. And the state of Ohio is also providing a $255,000 training grant for the operation. Also in the mix, we have the Greater Cleveland Partnership that's working with the company to arrange energy conservation rebates with CEI that are based on the efficiencies of the new plant facility.
My understanding is that the use of this large-scale leverage incentive grant is fairly rare.
Yes.
What was the last one that we did and for how
Yeah,
much?
2 years ago, Councilman, it was the ABB Inc. project that was done in Highland Hills. You are correct. It's rare when we use this large-scale incentive grant tool, only in certain sort of collective efforts. ABB was a company that moved in from I believe it was Eastlake, into Highland Hills and built their headquarters in an advanced technology center, an R&D center at Green and Harvard.
And the item before us is just the exemption. When is the actual grant expected to come before the Board of Control?
Well, I guess I'll ask OPD, and as I understand it, the way this worked last time, again, this is an unusual situation. Essentially, we are asking for the alternative procurement process to allow us to execute a grant agreement. So we're
So
really...
you're saying this is the only approval that's required?
Correct,
by the
as
Board
I
of
understand it,
Control?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. McAleer.
2 questions. One, is there a time period that they have to create the 128 jobs by?
They do, Trevor. They're given 3 years, which is, you'll recall, is a typical pattern that we have for our loans. So they will have 3 years after the completion of the project to produce 128 the various jobs that they're doing: manufacturing, operators, engineers, and managers.
And if it's not met, is it tiered? If they get 120, if there's a couple shy,
Well, we have again. First of all, I again, right top on in the list of the grant requirements, we do have the requirement that if they have to do 2 things: they have to complete the project, which we get certified proof of, and secondly, they have to produce those 128 jobs within 3 years. There is language that we have always in the boilerplates of our agreement that basically do give some credence to downturns in economies. There are sort of formulas that we have that allow for a little bit extra time for the company to do things if their good faith efforts have reached them to a level that we're satisfied that they're well on their way to doing that. So save for that little bit of caveat kind of language. So we do, again, I want to make clear, this is a clawback situation. If the project isn't completed, if those jobs are not created, if the company leaves the area, all of that would institute a clawback. And this grant is also being guaranteed by the corporate parent.
And under the economic impact, you provide the sales tax benefit to the county?
Yes.
About 27,000?
Yes.
Do you, or have you looked at the benefit in terms of property taxes that the county would see from the project?
We have not. We did not go to that point, but I think that that's something that is missing, and we should take a clear look at that. Again, essentially, we will have increase in property value there. It's part of the business park, and it's part of a master sort of project. So you've got 4 or 5 buildings in that park right now, and so to try to gauge what kind of tax revenues we'd see will be a little complicated. But you make a good point. We should have that in the formula. In addition, we are going to garner, the county itself will garner a one-time sales tax amount of money from the sales of the sales taxable materials and purchases from the project. But we can follow up with the real estate tax piece that would help sort of show the augment the picture here.
I just think it's a significant benefit that
Yeah,
we don't have listed.
correct.
Councilwoman Baker.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just making sure I understand where the 300,000 is going to be spent. In the backup and on the item number, it says it's in the amount not to exceed 300,000 for construction of new advanced manufacturing facility. On the incentive handout, total project capital expenditures, $59 million.
Yes, and on a latter page is the line item budget of that project. Just to give you more, next page, Councilwoman. I'm sorry, one more. I'm so sorry. I think it may have been mislabeled. There you go. Yes. So what you have here is a line item, specific detailed budget of the project. What we typically do, and we would do in this case, in that there is so much equipment and machinery that comes as part and parcel of this project, we would be paying for portions of that. We would be getting really what it boils down to, again, per our normal formula, we reimburse. So we get proof from the company that they have expended, they've purchased certain things vis-a-vis this budget, and that we will reimburse them upon proof of the payment.
Okay. The loan amount is for, what is it?
The project total cost is $59,871,250 per the budget.
Got it. Good. Thank you for that detailed list.
Any other questions, Councilman Miller?
We need the jobs. I'm going to move for approval.
It's been moved by Councilman Miller, second by Mr. McAleer. All those in favor of the exemption, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The exemption is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that's the last item. We now move on to the consent agenda.
Yes, consent agenda item numbers BC 2019-643 through 647.
I do have a couple of questions on my end, so if everybody wants to take a look. I know it's late. I have a question. The first one, 643 for the Office of Homeless Services. I mean, it lists in there the reference to being a collaborative applicant. The county is also the direct applicant for several renewal projects, and it has Frontline, 4 family shelters, Salvation Army, and then it has $732,000 for reallocation of various activities. Do you have any detail on that?
I have some information. I don't have final information, but HUD encourages continuums of care each year to look at all of their existing projects to determine both effectiveness and if they are addressing the highest level of need. And so because of an infusion of funds from some other sources, some of the dollars that we had previously received for rapid rehousing Our reallocation committee is recommending to our advisory board to redirect those funds to meet other needs for some more permanent supportive housing, and also I think for for additional data management costs.
Could you get us the detail on that? I mean, it's a pretty big number to just be in there as.
It is, yeah. We don't have final, I mean, those funds are being reallocated. We won't have the final decision from our advisory board for another week or two in terms of what they're recommending, but we can get you.
Okay, Andrea, can you make a note of that?
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next, 644 is for the sheriff's office. It's for the burn grant. It says in here, the city of Cleveland requires a signed MOU by Thursday, August 22nd. Failure to provide the MOU may result in a loss of grant funds.
Stephen Witt with the Sheriff's Department. We talked with the city of Cleveland, and they are willing to wait until this meeting, and we are able to provide a signed document. But it was initially required by that Thursday.
Okay, just want to make sure of that. And then I know there was a question from the council side on some of the food awards, and that is everything been rectified to, I mean, a couple of these things, we're replacing somebody who failed to deliver with somebody who then we rule them out for another and replace them. I mean, are these the result of those reverse auctions, or are these direct bids?
These are the results of our normal buy-speed food bids. To run through it, V&J Services failed to deliver for the second. They failed to deliver in the first quarter, and they failed to deliver in the third quarter, and they now have been suspended. They failed to deliver at all. J&S Foods, in regard to their frozen vegetables award, they were not able. Their supplier was not able to provide them what they anticipated they were going to be able to provide for those frozen vegetables. The Benjamin Foods for the kosher meat, they had misread the requisition, and they were not able to provide the kosher meat at all. We attempted to replace that with a different vendor. Nobody was able to provide what we were requesting for the kosher meat. The other award that was rescinded or decreased was New England Foods for frozen vegetables. They were able to provide our July bid for our frozen vegetables, but their supplier will not deliver because we do not meet their minimum order quantity for August and September, and so that's why we need to move on to another vendor.
Okay.
Other than these rescinded awards to these vendors, other than V&J, we have not had any issues with the rest of the awards because each of these vendors has multiple food commodities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from anyone on any other aspect of the consent agenda? Councilwoman Baker?
Clarification on the Sheriff's Department for the understanding with the contract that's dated 10/1. Is there, I guess, this is for a 2019 Edward Byrne Medical Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. There's October, November, and December in 2018.
Yes, so the City of Cleveland is the fiduciary agent, so they're the one who receives the grant, and then we're a sub-grantee of that. So they have received their award, and now they have to divvy it up and get approval to give us a sub-grant.
So again, given this is going into September of 2019, should this contract be dated as of September 1st, or have services been given and not paid, or?
So this is the MOU, which is with the county and the City of Cleveland and the rest of the municipalities included, that we're all in agreement that the City of Cleveland will act as the fiduciary agent. And while it has the initial grant period dates, I believe our MOU specifies that we'll receive funds October through the end of the period 2022, sorry. But because the official grant period is 10/1/2018, we have to include that date.
Have there been any services?
No. Again, we are just submitting the MOU for approval, and then we'll move on with there will be another approval that will come forward with the actual grant agreement.
Okay, and that will be then dated the date?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaren?
Sorry for you. On the vendors that are being rescinded for the food and stuff, I noticed there's a food replacement for everyone that's getting rescinded except for the kosher meat.
So we diligently tried to replace the kosher meat. No vendor was able to provide that at a reasonable price. We anticipate the full service vendor coming in and handling everything. We anticipate them to be in place the beginning of the year, hopefully sooner, but they're currently in negotiation. So we do have the fourth quarter food bids out right now, and we have a new kosher meat for the fourth quarter that we're allowing basically any type of bid, anything they can provide, they can bid on.
So just as follow-up, what are we doing anything for July through September for
No,
those particular?
those are being handled by the prepackaged kosher meals at this time.
Okay, so we're still providing that. It's just not.
Yeah,
in bulk.
the kosher meals are still being provided. This was initially an attempt by our kitchen staff to try and reduce the costs because those prepackaged meals can be quite costly, but we were unable to find a satisfactory solution.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Dever. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Is there any other business?
No other business at this time.
And is there any closing public comment?
Yes, I just wanted to state that in observance of the Labor Day holiday taking place on Monday, September 2nd, the next Board of Control meeting will take place on Tuesday, September 3rd.
Okay. Seeing there's no other business, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.